Paso Children's was pretty blunt about what it expects to get out of a bankruptcy filing. In a news release, they say, quote, under the protection of the restructuring laws, UMC and its board of directors will have no supervisory, advisory, or operational control of El Paso Children's Hospital. UMC's role will be that of a building landlord and will provide common services to El Paso Children's Hospital. University Medical Center promised us a statement shortly after 10 this morning. They've told us they're having email difficulty and that they're awaiting approval from Board Chairman Steve DeGroat. We'll bring you the UMC response as soon as they provide it. And joining us now, El Paso County Judge Veronica Escobar, who's been a vocal opponent of a bankruptcy filing. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Now, we understand this was a surprise to you. You heard about this through the media,
right.
And so did UMC, from what I understand.
We all did. Neither the board nor the CEO for El Paso Children's Hospital had the courage to call any of us to let us know they were going to do this. And in fact, it was our worst fear. We were always afraid that the board would make a decision in the middle of the night and we'd wake up and find that they had decided to take the worst possible option for this community and the institution, and that's exactly what happened.
So why are we sitting on a 3.5-year-old hospital in bankruptcy when the studies show that it was financially viable?
So a lot changed for El Paso Children's before it had an opportunity to be fully successful. But I'll tell you the same thing that I have told many other people, Maria. Every organization, whether it be public or private, faces huge challenges. You never get an easy road. Things are never crisis-free. But good leadership and sound fiscal decisions can help you navigate through those troubled waters. And some of the decisions that the El Paso Children's Hospital Board made were poor decisions. They chose not to take some advice and guidance that I think could have changed the direction of the hospital. And in the end, when they were in essentially financial ruin, they had an opportunity to take advantage of an extraordinarily good deal with a strategic partner and with a governing body that wanted the same things they wanted, which is an amazing children's hospital that could be sustained going into the future and that could be grown. They walked away from that deal, they said no to that deal, and they chose bankruptcy.
Now, Children says that UMC radically changed the terms on them last minute than what was agreed upon in mediation. Do you share that impression? Did UMC do a bait and switch on Children's?
I think the term radically is laughable. Children's understood there was some legal advice that both UMC and the Commissioner's Court received. Legal advice that because we are both governments, essentially, UMC is a quasi-government, we are a government, there were certain things we could not agree to that Children's was insistent on. Both the Commissioner's Court members reached out to Children's to explain that, UMC board members reached out to Children's to explain that, but Children's dug its heels in, and I now suspect that they had been planning bankruptcy all along.
Now, what was it? What changed last Wednesday in that latest term sheet? Can you tell us what was it that made Children's, they say, change their mind about this?
So there were a couple things that Children's wanted from UMC. Number one, there's a lien that they wanted lifted, which would have been irresponsible because we all feared that they would, in the middle of the night, make a decision to declare bankruptcy, which is precisely what they did. And they also wanted UMC to essentially say that it had no fiduciary duty to make no fiduciary flexibility to make decisions should there be crises in the future. And so they wanted to be able to dictate what would happen in the future. As a governing body, the Commissioner's Court, for example, we cannot bind future Commissioner's Courts or future governing bodies. We make decisions on an annual basis, budget by budget by budget. But what we did to try to alleviate their fears was say, look, if your fundamental fear is that UMC will essentially take over your services and turn them into adult services, we'll safeguard that by forcing them to come before Commissioner's Court before any major decision. We spent enormous amounts of time creating a document that would offer that safeguard or that safety net or that protection. That still wasn't enough.
Okay, so who's liable now? What happens to the taxpayers' investment in Children's Hospital? I know earlier you tweeted that them filing for bankruptcy essentially means that UMC continues to give them services for free.
Right. So until a judge, a bankruptcy judge, or the trustee determines what each vendor will get paid, how each vendor will get paid, we're essentially in a holding pattern going forward. The trustee, though, will at some point figure out with the creditors, with people like UMC, and I think UMC holds the best position going forward in this respect, but the trustee will determine who gets paid back, how much, etc. But all of that is now out of the hands of the children's board members. I don't know that they fully understand just how serious their decision is, how tragic their decision is, and how really harmful the decision is for their hospital.
They say that from the beginning UMC inflated costs to Children's Hospital and that UMC had an oppressive approach towards Children's Hospital. What do you think about that?
You know, what is very frustrating, I've been reading some of the materials that they have filed with the bankruptcy court, and they complain about agreements that they agreed to. They complain about contracts that they signed. And so I don't know what it would take for the board to finally take responsibility for their own actions. The costs that were associated with the contracts were renegotiated recently, and the costs didn't drop that much. Administrative costs were eliminated when administrative costs are essentially a fundamental practice in government. So there was nothing unusual about the contracts or the costs. We investigated that a year ago.
So you're saying UMC did not overcharge Children's?
I don't believe UMC overcharged Children's. I have asked them repeatedly to show us evidence of that. I have yet to see a shred of evidence.
Okay. One last question. You said that you got some information that shows Children's had passed a resolution that you all didn't even know back in February
to support bankruptcy.
To support bankruptcy.
Right. And so I think we're all a little bit confused why we were led down this road of mediation when they made the decision long ago to declare bankruptcy.
And how do you know they made that decision? How did you learn about
now,
that?
I haven't seen it yet, but I heard about it from UMC, and so I'm eager to take a look at that. If that does exist, then that's a huge breach of trust, because many of us were operating under the impression that they were considering bankruptcy, but that it was a last resort. If they made this decision back in February, they have been essentially deceiving the taxpayer, because they've been receiving services for free all this time. And they have harmed the taxpayer, they have harmed UMC, they have harmed Texas Tech, they have harmed this community.
Okay. County Judge Veronica Escobar, thank you so much. Big story today. We usually don't have these long interviews at 4, but definitely a lot of public interest. We appreciate it.